depending on like when you're graduating, like most people, so like say that you're like a junior in college and you plan on matriculating into medical school like as soon as you graduate from college. So like you should probably take your MCAT like your like first, if earliest, semester of junior year or like the latest, like early summer after your junior year, because you have to start applying by the summer before your senior year. So that's basically like what, like a year, like yeah, like a year before you matriculate, you should yeah, like you should have like your MCAT done or like start to like take your MCAT. But I think it really depends on like the like where you're at in your process of it. Cause like I know some people like maybe they haven't taken like Orgo 2. So that means they have to take Orgo 2 and like biochem and like so they have like other prereqs to get out of the way before they can start studying for like the MCAT. So just kind of make sure that you have most of your prerequisites out of the way and like you're probably only self-teaching like one maybe two classes to yourself. Um so yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Can you talk about how much your score increased from your first diagnostic exam to actual test day?
Me, I think my score increased by like 20 points. So studying does work. Um, and what I did is like I did take those half-length exams, so I wasn't really sure about my score when I was doing those. So that took maybe about like 2 or 3 months. But then I started taking full lengths like about once a month to start building that test taking stamina. And I think it also worked in my favor because I did see my score start to increase after every single month. And that definitely was a huge motivator in keeping me on track and staying disciplined until the very end. So I do recommend that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
so
score
my,
was like 12
oh,
points. Oh, go ahead, Ethan.
oh, okay. Basically, my score started out, I did the half-length diagnostic, and that got me like a 497. And basically, and that was before I had any biochem knowledge. I didn't do any content review. And that was throughout last semester. So during the semester, every other week, I took a full length and I took the blueprint full lengths, which are a little bit harder than the actual full length, the real exam. I would say throughout all of those, I didn't score higher than like a 506, right? I went like 501, 503, 505, like slowly increasing, but not necessarily anywhere near what I wanted to do. After, so then towards the end of winter break, I'd finished studying all my material and I made a switch. I did all 4 AMC practice exams and it went 511, 514, 517, and then 519. So basically you can improve a lot. I trusted that I knew the material, and the AMC practice exams were a lot different for me than third parties. So because of that, I was able to basically take what each a little bit from each one and improve. And by that time, I felt like also my reading comprehension skills were up to par to what I wanted it to be on the exam. It was only that I needed to fill in small gaps in my knowledge. So because of that, I was able to increase the score so quickly. So that's the main thing, that someone said 75% of the exam is your reading comprehension skills and only 25% is the content. If you have the reading comprehension skills, your ceiling is going to be really, really high. And then after that, it's really just memorizing material to get your floor up to the ceiling, basically.
All right, how much math was on the MCAT, especially regarding the physics and chemistry areas?
I can start off by answering that. Because the MCAT doesn't allow you to use a calculator, a lot of the math or a lot of the answer options that they give you are kind of rounded off, or they might not be rounded off, but you have to round off your answer and kind of pick what's closest to that answer. So the bulk of like the math is in the chemistry physics section, and it's definitely doable. All of because you're not able to use a calculator, they kind of make the math simple enough that you can answer it without a calculator.
Yeah, I would actually say it's kind of an underrated, like, hard thing about the exam. Like, before you do it, you kind of need to review like your elementary school math skills that you probably haven't worked on in a while, like your multiplication tables, your division, because you will have to use that, because the numbers they give you, you can round them, but they're going to be super long decimal numbers that you're going to have to multiply and divide, and you don't get a calculator, right? But that actual math really doesn't get beyond multiplication and division. And for physics, it's just memorizing the equations. But the way that it applies the equations is going to be very, very simple.
Something that I think people also forget is scientific notation. Doing your, what are they called? Doing operations with scientific notation is really important, because sometimes they'll give you, like, for example, just some random number, like something to like the 23rd. You're gonna have to know like how to multiply and divide with that. So then also brushing up on your log rules and like exponent rules too, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna add to what Julie said. Like sometimes, like since the MCAT is a lot of like just what you're given off of like a table or an experiment, and then you just have to like interpret the information. Like sometimes you'll just like have a table and it'll say like how many times greater is this result than this result. So like you'll really have to be able to like manipulate numbers like with like several orders of magnitude. Like so like I don't know, 10 to the 23 divided by like 10 to the 6 like type of number. So you just have to know like how to quickly do stuff like that. Or like with physics, if you're finding like equivalent resistance, like in like a circuit or whatever, like sometimes like fractions will come into that. So just like knowing how to do like simple like fractions like multiplication and division. But yeah, it doesn't get too complicated.
Another thing, like going off what Ethan said, like knowing the physics equations, I think another big thing about those equations is like knowing the trends. Like if you increase this, what happens to this, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the final important thing is also the units. So they can ask you, you can get caught up on units sometimes, and that'll be one of the things where you're like, oh, geez, I shouldn't have gotten that wrong at all. Or any math really on the exam, if you prepare, there should be no reason to get any of it wrong. It's very simple math. If you know how to, do your powers of tens, if you know your units, and if you know the right equations, then everything should be super, super easy.
All right, can you guys talk about what test day was like? Did anything surprise you?
Something that kind of surprised me is I actually wouldn't recommend wearing clothes that have a lot of pockets or like any super heavy jackets, because every time you go in and out of the room with the computer to take the exam, they have to check your pockets and make you take off your jacket to see like if you bring anything out, because you're not supposed to. And so that shaves off time from your break. And the break is really precious to some people, so keep that in mind. For me, it wasn't a huge deal, but I could see how someone who wants to take the full break would really care about that.
Yeah, I think an important thing for me was that I visited my testing center like a week before I took the test. And then every night or every time like I just had a moment to myself, I would visualize myself just walking in there. Like I knew where the bathroom was, I knew where the test room was, I knew what it looked like inside there, because they were nice and they let me see. So I was able to just visualize, all right, like physically being there, every day. Visualize the morning when I walk in, visualize all my breaks when I leave and then come back. And just those little things made me a lot more confident going into the test, because I didn't really have to worry about that. I just kind of had to, all I had to worry about was the actual material and taking the test.
Yeah, I think I would just say like expect to be nervous, obviously, because it's an important exam that you're going to take. So I would just say like go in like knowing some type of like thing that like calms you down, or like I don't know. So if you like deep breathing, like have a deep breathing routine going on. Like whenever I was in like a particularly like hard stretch of the exam, like I would just have to like remind myself to like breathe through it or whatever. So like definitely come in prepared with like any sort of like stress relief things that like you rely on, whether it's like mentally or like some fidget thing that you do, like anything that can like help calm you down. Like I know some people like blow on their thumb. So like whatever it is like for you, just like I guess kind of have those practice beforehand, so like your anxiety doesn't kind of get the best of you on test day.
Yeah, I think definitely one thing that can be discouraging is like having to flag a question and then move on. Sometimes that can be discouraging, but it's important just to know that you gave your best guess or best educated guess on that question and then move on, and then you still have time to go back to the questions that you flagged. So the important thing is not to get too discouraged on test day, because there are going to be questions that you're not 100% sure of. But it's just important not to get discouraged, because that can just lead to getting stressed and then not being able to fully understand the passage, and then not being able to answer the questions to the best of your ability.
And how long in advance did you schedule your MCAT exam?
I scheduled it as soon as it was open. I know some people have talked about this before. It's kind of difficult to get a test, especially on the coasts, especially on the West Coast, because there's so many people trying to take it. So I tried to do it on the day it opened for whichever like target date I wanted. So for example, I wanted to take it in May. So I think that opened up in February. So I think the best way to follow when those dates come up isn't necessarily the AMC website. It's actually AMC's Twitter. They're very active on their Twitter about that sort of stuff. And the website, it updates a little bit slower, but try to get it as soon as possible, because there's sometimes where people just can't get a spot and they're on the wait list, or people have to travel like across states to go take it. And that's obviously an extra layer of stress that you would rather avoid.
Yeah, I would say if possible, try to like schedule it a minimum of like 3 months out, and like try to be sure then too, because like I remember like I was going to retake my MCAT in like January or something, and then like I wanted to reschedule it to like March, but then like by the time like I was looking, like March and April were completely filled up, so I pushed it to like May or something. So yeah, so just make sure that you try to get it like as early as possible and try not to move it. But if you have to, that's okay. But just know that it will probably be like a couple months past the date that you want to move it to.
All right, and how many times did you take the MCAT, or will you take the MCAT?
I am planning to retake the exam just because I think I'm not like 100% satisfied with my score, and it doesn't hold to the standards that I am trying to or to my own standards. So hopefully the second time around taking the MCAT is my last time taking it, but it can vary from person to person. I know the limit to take the MCAT is like 3 times within a year, and 7 times total for 7 times total. So for most people, it's between one is usually 1 or 2 times taking the exam. It can be more, and that really just varies from person to person.
Yeah, for me, I only took it once, and part of what helped me to do well the one time that I wanted to was that I was completely all in for the one time that I took it. I think like an underrated thing that would help you is the confidence going into it and just your mental state before you take the test. So for me, I finished all the AMC material, and there's really not that much, and that's the best material that you can do. So I finished it all, and that was my way of showing myself like, all right, I'm all in. There's nothing else that I could do really to improve after this. And like if I don't do well, I don't do well. Like I'll be kind of screwed, but I know I'm gonna do well because I have to. So that's what helped me out a lot. But if you truly don't feel ready, then it's okay to take multiple. Like it's a really common thing. But for me personally, I didn't want to have to do it again. So that's just how I approached it.
I personally have taken mine once, and I'm going to take another one in May. Going into my first one, like I thought I did like pretty well, but I also knew that there was like information that like I didn't know. Like I felt that I could have done better, like even going into my first one, but I was like, you know what, like we're taking it early. Like I took it September of like last year, like so 2021. So I was like, like we're just doing it early. If we get a great score, great. Like you don't have to take it again. But if you want to, then you have time. So I kind of just like went into it like confident, but like knowing that I could have like done more. So I'm taking another one just because like I know that my score can improve if I just put like a little bit more effort into it. But yeah, I think it depends because like it just depends like where you like want to apply to. So if you get like one score and you're happy with it, depending on like where you want to go to school, then like no need to take it again. Like it depends on like a lot of things like your GPA. So if you have like a lower GPA, then like you probably should aim for like the highest MCAT possible. Or like if you have like a really high GPA and like a decently high MCAT, then like maybe round out your application with like other things. So like the number of times that you take it really depends on like the rest of your application, what kind of school you want to get into, and like what you feel like is your personal best. So just kind of weigh all of that into that decision.
I'm in the same boat as Ethan, and I think people have already emphasized this, but I want to say it again because it's just so important. A huge part of this exam is mental, and what Ethan said, I think, really is true. Like, if you go all in, then you know, like you're gonna do well because you've worked so hard. Don't like trust your hard work. There's no way that won't pay off. But something else that people told me that really helped me is that you're never ever going to feel ready. Like it's just something you're going to have to do. Everyone has that kind of anxiety and nervousness or low self-confidence when it comes to exams. Test anxiety is real. So going into the, like, I don't think it's possible to ever feel like completely prepared for the exam. So normalizing and feeling comfortable with being nervous, I think really did help me perform as well as I wanted to the first time around.
That we got for the breaks on the MCAT, are you allowed to bring study materials for the next section and use it? Can you bring your phone? And what else?
Do not do
No.
don't bring study
Oh.
materials. Don't like turn on your phone. Like you will have your test voided. You're only allowed to like bring food and water pretty much. And your phone's supposed to
Yeah.
stay in like a sealed bag the whole time.
The proctors will actually seal your phone, and I think some of them take them from you. I think it depends on test site to test site, but the only paper you're allowed to have in your locker, I think also is just like that confirmation that you do have a test reserved for that day. They're very strict about that, so do not try to pull anything because it won't work.
Great. So before we get into any final thoughts, I wanted to share some of the resources that we had in the Tutoring and Testing Center to help you prepare for the MCAT exam. So all of our workshops we record and add to our YouTube page. So you can look at even past workshops that we've done. We've done a little different ones each year. If you'd like to take a mock exam in the testing center, it's really the best way to kind of get a realistic testing experience. And we give you a locker so you can turn off your cell phone and just focus for those 7.5 hours for your practice exam. I highly recommend to do this, especially as you get close to test day, just to kind of get that experience and kind of get some of those jitters out. We do have a lending library where we have some of the more popular study guides available for a 2-week checkout period. So we're getting even more books in now. So if you're just looking for extra practice, or if it's early in your study process and you want to look through maybe a couple different study guides, come check out our lending library. We're located on the 2nd floor of the Student Affairs building. We do have a Pinterest that has a lot of different free resources from around the internet, kind of compiled under preparing for the MCAT within that board. So check that out. And then if you are looking for help with goal setting, with setting a study schedule, you can set up an appointment with an academic success coach through Navigate. So the same way you do a tutoring appointment or an academic advising appointment. So these are just some of the resources we have in the Tutoring and Testing Center. All right, so for the panel, any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with those that have attended today?
I just wanted to mention something that I don't think we really touched on, but it was motivation for studying, right? It's staying motivated throughout your study process. So you just got to think about this. What is your final goal? because everyone trying to take the MCAT is going to try to get into medical school, right? You're trying to be a doctor. So the role of a doctor is to be a teacher, you know, a leader, a healthcare professional, but you're also an expert in your field. So you need to know all these things. You know, you're expected to be super knowledgeable, right? So that's kind of what the MCAT was about for me. That's knowing that helped me study, because it was like, all right, if I can do this, you know, or if I can't do this, you know, what type of doctor am I going to be? So that was what motivated me to learn this stuff and to try to do as well as I could.
I think something that I think this kind of happened to me over COVID, since I did study through COVID through isolation, is that studying for the MCAT can be very solitary if you're not careful. I think it's a little bit easier when you're on campus because you might have peers and friends who are also studying for it as well. But that also comes with its own downsides. So something I want to talk about really quickly is just everyone learns at their own pace. So try not to compare your scores with other people, because maybe they're doing something that works for them but doesn't work for you. So don't just necessarily copy them in hopes that you will also get their scores. But also be careful not to isolate yourself. If you ever do feel like you're not improving at the rate that you want to, you can top. I'm sure there's other pre-meds on campus who are willing to talk to you about that, and even other near peers who have also taken the exam like us. I'm sure they have other words of wisdom and more encouragement for that, because I think the MCAT is a really unique hurdle in a pre-meds career, because like I'm sure all of us have taken exams, but none of the exams have been as comprehensive or as long or as unique as the MCAT. So definitely staying connected to your support system, I think, is super important, which also helps for motivation, like Ethan said.
All right, thank you. So I want to just say a big thank you to Ethan, Julie, Rushi, and Annie for being our panelists today. I know you offered a lot of really good advice, answered a lot of questions. I really appreciate your time. I know the people that have attended really appreciated your time and you just sharing your words of wisdom.